Hello, my name is Connie Brown, and I'm a vision rehab training specialist with Independent Living for Adult Blind in Jacksonville, Florida. Other members of my team are Peter Bianchi, assistive technology instructor who is visually impaired and will be demonstrating human guide techniques with me. Michael Pugh, assistive technology instructor, is doing the videography. Techniques are being supervised by Amy Johnson and Kim Fair, both certified orientation and mobility specialists. These video clips are presented for the purpose of demonstrating sighted guide and self-protection skills for persons with visual impairments. The skills being demonstrated are based on best practices of orientation and mobility. Adaptations may be made based on additional disabilities and age-related conditions. However, it is recommended that human guide and self-protection skills adhere as closely as possible to best practices. We will begin with how to introduce oneself and offer sighted guide to the person who is visually impaired. Even though the individual may recognize your voice, it is common courtesy to introduce yourself and offer sighted guide. It is the visually impaired person's prerogative as to whether or not he wishes to travel sighted guide. Hi Peter, it's Connie. How are you doing today?
Well, hey, how you doing?
I'm fine. I was going to go down and get some coffee. Would you like to go down?
Oh, sure.
You want to go sighted guide?
Sure.
Okay. Once the person with the visual impairment has indicated that he wishes to travel sighted guide, it is recommended that the guide make hand contact with the person's hand. This gives the person a reference point for moving up your arm and locating your elbow. Once the elbow is located, the person will grasp the guide's arm just above the elbow with a firm but not tight grip. Thumb to the outside of the guide's arm with all other fingers to the inside of the guide's arm. Now we're ready to travel sighted guide. As we walk, the guide should be 1/2 step ahead of the person who is being guided. The shoulders should be aligned, always remembering that the person being guided should never step out to the side or ahead of the guide because this could endanger both parties. Walk at a comfortable pace that is comfortable for both parties. Traveling, it may be necessary to change travel directions. In order to reverse the direction, an about-face turn is needed. When doing an about-face, the guide should pause and state that she is turning around. The two parties should face one another, exchange arms, and proceed with travel. It is advised, especially if the person being guided has other disabilities or conditions, that contact with the guide not be lost. Here we're going to need to turn around. During travel, it may be necessary to change sides. This could be due to an upcoming obstruction, arm fatigue, or other reasons. When transferring, it is not necessary to stop completely. The guide should slow down while the person being guided grips the guide's arm with both hands. The guided person can then move his hand to the guide's other arm, followed by moving his other hand to the guide's arm as well. At no time should the guide or the person being guided lose contact with one another. Let's demonstrate. Here we need to change sides. When traveling in a narrow area, the guide will alert the person being guided that the area is going to narrow by pulling the arm back behind her. The person being guided will then reach further down so that he can get a better position in behind the guide. If the area narrows even further, then the individual can get further behind the guide. When approaching a chair that is located against the wall, the guide will bring the individual around in front of the chair, indicate that he is standing directly in front. If there is an armrest available, the guide may reach down to touch the armrest to give the individual additional orientation. Notice that he again checks the chair for any obstructions before being seated. There are several scenarios for seating depending on the type of seating and layout. When seating someone at a chair that is standing or located away from a wall, the guide will place her hand on the back of the chair. This enables the person being guided to locate the chair back. Notice as Peter goes around the chair prior to being seated, he checks the chair to make sure there are no obstructions before he's seated. If he were sitting at a table, he would also reach and locate the table. When approaching a door, the guide should pause. As the guide opens the door, the person being guided should notice if the guide stepped forward or backward. This would indicate which direction the door will move. When going through the door, The person being guided should hold out his free hand in a protective position to anticipate the door. After a few steps, if he does not feel the door, he should reverse hands on the guiding arm and reach for the door on the other side. Verbal cues are also appropriate. Ready? Approaching the door, it's going to open on your right. Rear the door, it's going to open on your left. It is always helpful to tell the person what is coming up. This is particularly true for stairs, doorways, obstacles, etc. When approaching stairs, pause as you reach the first stair. Let the person know if the stairs are going up or down. Make sure he is next to the railing and can grasp it. Let him know that the railing is there. If you get to a landing or turn in the stairs, pause and let him know. As you get to the bottom or top of the stairs, say there is one more step as you approach the bottom or top step. Travel on stairs should be at a pace that is comfortable for the person being guided, keeping one step behind the guide. The same technique applies for curbs and drop-offs. We'll demonstrate. How you doing today?
Good.
Your stairs, railings to your right going down. One more step, landing, continuing down, railing on your right. Approaching stairs going up, railing is on your right. Last step, landing. Search patterns for dropped objects. First, localize to the sound or direction in which the object dropped. Before crouching down, use a modified protective technique to guard your head. There are various techniques for searches. Most involve laterally, meaning searching on one side and then the other, moving forward in circular concentric or square concentric movements. Once the object is located, always be sure to use a protective technique when standing, as you may have moved forward and be underneath an overhang, table, or other upper body protective techniques. Raise your arm to shoulder height and extend it out in front of your body as if you were pointing straight ahead. Bend your arm toward the face. Curl your fingers, spread them slightly apart and outwards so that they face away from your body. It is important to maintain your hand and arm in this position so that your upper body is partially protected. Initially, you may be able to hold this position for only a moment or two, but with repeated practice, you will be able to maintain this position for longer periods of time. If your arm becomes tired, you can switch and use your other arm, repeating the previous steps to maintain the correct position. Lower body protective techniques. Position your arm downward as if you were pointing at the floor. Position your hand with your palm in front of you and facing the opposite thigh, approximately 10 to 12 inches from your body. Curl your fingers, spread them slightly apart, and keep your wrists straight with your palm facing your body so that the back of your hand will make contact with any object you encounter. Try to keep your fingers relaxed while walking. Keep maintaining your hand and arm in this position so that your lower body is partially protected. If your arm becomes tired, you can switch and use your other arm, repeating the previous steps to maintain the correct position. A combination of upper and lower body protective techniques. A combination of upper and lower body provides the best protective coverage, especially in unfamiliar areas. Trailing techniques. Stand with the side of your body about 6 inches from the wall. Extend your hand in front of you at approximately hip level and angle downward toward the floor, about 12 inches from your body. You may also extend the other hand to upper body protective techniques. The back of your hand should come in contact with the wall, with your fingers slightly cupped toward your palm. This will prevent you from injuring your fingers if they make contact with an object. Your fingers will also act as bumpers to warn you about objects that you may encounter. Walk forward slowly while holding your arm in this position, keeping the backs of your fingers, especially the knuckles of your ring and pinky fingers, in contact with the wall. Make sure that the back of your hand is always in contact with the surface while you are moving. When you make contact with or locate an object, take a few moments to examine and identify it. Walking further, if you come to a doorway or any other obstruction, walk across the doorway and resume trailing to the other side. When a person who is blind or visually impaired is introduced to a new place or area for the first time, there are several things that can be done to familiarize them to the room or area. If accompanied by someone who is sighted, it is acceptable for the sighted person to provide a description of the area. While this may be somewhat helpful, it is not a substitute for exploring and familiarizing on one's own. Familiarization should begin at the door or entrance area. The person should use upper body to avoid encounters with overhangs and either cane or lower body protective techniques. Familiarization of the area should begin with exploration of the perimeter of the area. Beginning on one side of the door or entryway, the person should walk with the cane or lower protective hand, making contact with the perimeter. As the person encounters objects such as cabinets, wall hangings, seating, electronics, and other items, he should take a moment to identify these items. These may be useful as landmarks or clues. The person will continue to explore the entire perimeter, making his way full circle back to the door. There are several options for exploring the perimeter. One calls for the person to explore approximately halfway around the room, make his way back to the door, and then explore going in the other direction. Another acceptable way is to explore the entire perimeter, returning back to the door. The method may be chosen based on personal preference, size of the area, or other rationale. Once the person has explored the perimeter, it is advisable for him to think about the location of objects in relation to the entry as well as cardinal direction. Squaring off and grid pattern familiarization. Once the individual has familiarized with the perimeter, it is time for him to explore the interior of the area. It may or may not be necessary to continue using upper body techniques, depending on the overhead area. Since this demonstration is inside a classroom in which there are no overhanging lights or other objects, it is fine to use only lower body protective techniques. When in doubt of whether or not to use upper body, the rule is to use them. The individual will square off from a wall and proceed to navigate from one side to the other, exploring objects as he encounters them. Once he reaches the wall on the opposite side of the room, he will move down a few steps, square off, and proceed again with moving and exploring to the other side. He will do this in a parallel pattern until he has explored the entirety of the room. Then he will explore the room in a perpendicular pattern to be sure that he is familiarized with all of the areas and objects within it. Again, once he has completed the interior familiarization, he should develop a mental picture of where items are located within the area in regard to the entrance and with cardinal directions.